But I think Cuba see the end. You know, all my life I've been hearing about the United States and Cuba. You know, when will the United States do it? I do believe I'll be having the honor of taking Cuba. That'd be good. That's a big honor.
Taking Cuba.
Taking Cuba in some form, yeah. Taking Cuba. I mean, whether I free it, take it, I think I can do anything I want with it. They want another too. They're a very weakened nation right now. They were for a long time. Very violent leaders. Castro was a very violent leader. His brother's a very violent leader. Extremely violent. That's how they governed. They governed with violence. But a lot of people...
That was President Donald J. Trump speaking about taking Cuba, the independent nation, just a few miles off the coast of Florida. This is On the Mark. I'm your host, Mark Evans Sr., and we're going to dive into it today. I have got a guest on, Elizabeth Beavers. She is a national security expert who's been published in multiple national and international publications. And I also went out to a recent No Kings rally here in Columbus, Ohio, where I spoke to people about imperialism and also why they came out to the No Kings rally. So you're going to hear more about that today. I think that we have to talk about manifest destiny. Donald Trump actually went out of his way in his second inaugural address to mention manifest destiny. He said he wanted to grow this country. He wanted to expand and explore. He wanted to go beyond these borders and see what else he could find. And he's held true to that. Look at Greenland. Look at Canada, how he wants them to be the 51st state. Let's look at how he kidnapped the leader of Venezuela. Let's look at how he's saying, Cuba's next. I'm coming for Cuba, baby. That's what he said. Let's talk about Palestine. He's looking at putting up Trump hotels and resorts there. That's someone's home that we should be helping to fix. Instead, he's trying to make it a new Dubai. You know, part of me feels like this is something new, something different, something more sinister than what we've seen before. But another part of me, and probably a large part of me, is thinking that this isn't that different from what we've seen before from other U.S. presidents, unfortunately. It's just a little more in our face. And he's saying the quiet part out loud. And we're not necessarily used to that. And this is something that has helped him build his political power, build his acumen on the world stage. He has been able to do that because he refuses to bite his tongue. And therefore, when he does things, they seem normal. They seem like what, a president can do because he does them unapologetically. And we're all worse off for it. So ask people what they thought at this past weekend's No Kings rally about Donald Trump and manifest destiny and his imperialist mindset. And here's what folks had to say. Do you think that Donald Trump is trying to institute manifest destiny?
You said manifest destiny?
Yeah.
In some ways, that's what America has been trying to do in big and small ways all of time. Like, that's what we started with.
Yeah.
Hello, indigenous people.
Nobody's hurting anybody except the government.
It just make no sense. He's using his power, and he feel himself too much to a point to where he feel like he can do whatever.
Yeah, honestly. Especially with what he's saying about, like, Greenland, like, all this stuff.
I don't think it's ever gone away.
It's contrary to what he said was his policy of America first.
He's just taking advantage, and now he's just in it for enriching himself.
Like the Pax Americana stuff going all the way out west. He wants Greenland. He wants to put his face on everything.
This feels like a flashback to like Bush, Reagan.
We going to war. He's trying to put us into war.
Honestly, history repeats itself. You know what I mean?
It's very blatant. It's very crude.
Sadly, as crazy as it sounds, all of this chaos is just a distraction while he and his family enrich themselves.
Yeah. So I think it's more Pax Trumpicana,
Yeah, I do want to note that this past weekend's No Kings rally was the largest protest on record in the United States. Next up, I want to show you some of my conversation with Elizabeth Beavers. I'm joined today by Elizabeth Beavers. Elizabeth is an assistant professor of law at Delaware Law School and previously spent more than a decade as a public interest advocate in Washington, D.C. on issues of national security, human rights, and civil liberties. Elizabeth, welcome to On the Mark.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, first off, I just want to ask you what exactly is meant when we talk about imperialism in today's context?
Sort of, a broad view when we think about imperialism, it's the idea that a particular government, a particular country is projecting power in a really aggressive way globally, exerting itself through conquest. It can be hard power, soft power, whatever, in a way that is aggressive and signifies a desire to not just project power, but take some level of like ownership and control and authority and primacy throughout the world. And so, that's kind of like historically how we've talked about it. And I think indisputably now, and not just now, but for quite a while, the United States has been the dominant superpower in the world and has created quite a bloody empire for itself and has been operating in this really expansionist, aggressive way in a lot of different contexts. And we're seeing that just made really explicit in the reign of the Trump administration.
Yeah, I'm glad that you say that because I view a lot of what Trump is doing as some things that have been happening before under other U.S. presidents. But, his language is just a bit harsher, a bit brasher. He's more in your face with it. But is he doing something more than those U.S. presidents are doing on the like
Yeah.
international arena?
Right. It's such a matter of debate, and there's really good points to make from different perspectives here. I'll tell you my view, which is that it's almost like a more honest thing that Trump is doing, where he's sort of like stripped away the niceties and the civility and the, at least like nodding to international law or trying to sort of check boxes about various required procedures. He's just sort of like going full throat with I am the king and I am the power and I take what I want. Just, you and I were talking. He just said this week explicitly he's going to take Cuba, using that exact language. He's talked about how he wants to take Greenland. We've already seen him preside over a literal kidnapping of the head of Venezuela. Now there's been the assassination of the leader of Iran, and there's an ongoing war there. So very clearly we've got at a minimum an intensification of what's been happening for a while, right? Where I think it's a little more controversial to acknowledge is that it didn't come out of nowhere. It's not a brand new thing that Trump is doing that no one's ever thought about before and we've never seen happen. As I said, I think for decades now, the United States has been projecting power in a way that is imperialist and primacist, as some like international relations experts will say, and in a way that maybe nods to international law or makes novel arguments of international law, but is not in any way actually keeping with the spirit of what international law represents. So whether that's the Iraq War, whether it's the very secretive drone wars that were happening globally, particularly ramped up under President Obama, whether it's joining with other countries and supporting their military activities, like when we've been really supporting Saudi Arabia and its like genocidal military campaign in Yemen for a while. What's really different is we don't even really hardly see the Trump administration saying like, this is why it's justified and this is why it's legal, because, the Obama administration lawyered up for sure. He had a whole team of really good lawyers who came up with all these really complicated arguments why, like, actually, this is totally fine what we're doing, and here's the very complicated legal reason. And the Trump administration is taking it to a more intense place. What is newer is consistently like state on state conflict, taking out the heads of state. Like that's a newer thing that he's bringing back, but he's also sort of just ramping up things that have been going on for a while and maybe being more honest about who the United States is on the global stage and has been for a while.
Okay, gotcha. Understood. So, do you think that like him being so so brash about it. And honestly, I do think there's something to like he's taking out world leaders, whether he is, assassinating them or kidnapping them. I know that we have some history of that, don't get me wrong, but does this kind of behavior precipitate more of that behavior from other leaders?
Right. I mean, we've seen for a while, at a minimum, other nations and governments that have more of an adversarial relationship with the United States will seize on things like that. Um, Maybe opportunistically to say like, well, they're doing it. Why is everybody coming after us when we do it? One example is, during the war on terror, early on under the Bush administration, there was a literal official government policy of secret detention and torture of people all over the globe in the name of like catching terrorists, and it ended up just being like a massive human rights violation that a couple of people died, and like literally just throwing the Geneva Conventions out the window and just engaging in like full-scale state-sanctioned torture in a way that we've been criticizing other countries for a long time. So then when you see, for example, the United States trying to kind of make like human rights speeches about like North Korea or Iran or Russia or whatever, and then them saying, "Who are you to talk to us?
Right.
Where's your moral authority right now?" Right? And so this was long before Trump was ever elected, where we've been engaging in certain practices under the auspices of security. Like this is going to make us more secure. And I think what hopefully we are starting to learn is that our security does not mean pushing the security of others down and engaging in human rights abuses and violent imperialism. Those things don't make us more safe. It makes the rest of the world hate us more and want to cooperate with us less, and gives us much less credibility to being any sort of force for good globally. So, particularly if we're even giving up the pretenses of international law, it definitely doesn't make it more likely that other countries who are more adversarial are not going to do the same, right? Like opportunistically, why wouldn't they seize on that and say like, well, if it's just a free-for-all now, if it's just raw power projection, that's the world the United States wants to create. Maybe that's the world they're going to get. So I certainly don't think it helps with anyone's security in that way.
I've seen a lot of people, kind of on both sides of fear of retaliation when it comes to Iran. When I say people, I mean, average citizens, average Americans, my neighbors, friends, family. I see a lot of them say, well, Iran can't strike us. They can't attack us. I see others saying, well, what if they can? Much like yourself, came of age during 9/11, after 9/11.
Yeah.
9/11 wasn't done by a military. um,
Right.
so I do wonder, what are your thoughts on whether or not we will see retribution? I feel like a lot of times when we see quote unquote retribution, it's our military bases in the Middle East that are close for them to strike. But is this something that we need to fear here at home?
I try not to engage in too much speculation one way or the other, whether it's because I think that our government likes to do a lot of threat inflation and make us feel like we're constantly under attack or at risk of attack in some way. And then there are others who just sort of like discount entirely, like, oh, we've got two giant oceans on either side and we're the strongest military in the world, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's the thing about being in a world full of humans is that nothing is that predictable. And but there are certain things we can assume to be true about the human condition. And I think that exactly as you say, right? Um, right now, I haven't seen any evidence put forward that Iran has any sort of capability at striking within the United States. And in fact, not that they've ever tried to or anything like that. But what we don't know is how just regular people who are not part of any government might react. And that, kind of towards the point we were talking about with everyone's security being diminished when we engage in just naked aggression like this. What butterfly effect does that kick off? What ripples in the stream does that initiate? Who gets angry at that and has a level of grievance against the United States and wants to engage violently as a result? And so I think from the very beginning, that was one of the core flawed assumptions going into the war on terror itself was the idea that when people engage in violence for political purposes, we were kind of told at the time, it's like, well, they're evil, they're irrational, they don't know anything but military force. We've got to go in and bomb the world to defeat them. And instead of saying, like, why are people engaging in violence? What grievances are underneath that? How have our practices in any way created what they call blowback, right? Where there are reactions and reactions to those reactions, and how could we actually play a constructive role in not being that aggressive player on the world stage that creates those sort of conditions for that level of anger and the culture for violence. So I think it's a really well taken point that, already just in the very narrow short term, we're seeing all the negative consequences of this new US-Israeli war on Iran. Who knows what those 20 years from now, people who are growing up with this in Iran, people who are growing up watching this, what are those second, third, and fourth order results and reactions that are going to happen? And we can't control those.
Feels like Groundhog Day right now. 'Cause it feels
Mm.
like we've done this before, and it just, what do we expect if we keep doing it?
Right.
Um,
Even, to take a couple of examples, we mentioned the Iraq War. Like the Iraq War very directly gave us ISIS. Like that is how that came about, is we destabilized an entire region and empowered sectarian violence and very much helped armed groups to recruit and to take power. And again, it's those like second, third order effects that clearly don't go into any of the planning, or like we're just arrogant enough to think it doesn't matter, but it creates more and more problems for ourselves. And it's like a continuous cycle of meeting violence with violence in that way. And another example that I'm sure we'll talk about quite a bit more is Cuba. Like what's happening with
yeah,
Cuba right now, right? As you have mentioned, Trump literally said, I'm going to take Cuba. Like the US being hostile to Cuba is and trying to take out their leader is certainly not new. I mean, there's been decades of Cuba policy that has, covertly tried to kill Fidel Castro for a long time, but, more broader than that, total embargo on the island, trying to starve the people, sanction them into a place of enough misery that they'll rise up and kill their leader. Like, these are not new ideas. This is Trump doing it in an excessively ugly and blatant and almost like unapologetic way, but he's building on a really ugly history that's been a long time in the making.
he mentioned that he's been talking to former presidents, and
Mm.
one former president in particular, who is like, I wish I would have done this in Iran. I wish this is what I would have done. And it's just so funny because he kept digging that hole of the lie. And he's like, I can't tell you. Well, maybe I can. I'll ask him. We'll see. He's someone I really like. It's definitely not Joe Biden. We know that much. It's not him. Obama, maybe. Biden, not Biden, but Bush, possibly. Clinton, probably not. But yeah, that was really interesting.
That was
Uh,
bizarre. And I think I saw, although maybe I haven't seen the latest, that at least a couple of the presidents have been like, I haven't talked to him. Like,
yeah,
it's
they,
not
they
me,
they've
right?
all come out and said it wasn't me.
Well, and he lies all the time, and he sort of like, I genuinely think he invents scenarios in his head, and he's not sure if they happened or not.
Yes.
But who knows? I don't know. Maybe somebody did say that to him. It's not like, there's been a huge movement towards bombing Iran for a really long time. Like when John McCain was running for president back in 2008, he literally like got up on stage and sang bomb, 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 Iran, bomb.
Oh,
Like he literally sang a whole bomb Iran song. So like probably there's a bunch of people who have wanted to do this. And now he's doing it, and look how great that's working out.
I remember I used to be terrified of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. I used to
Right,
think like every day back then felt like it was like, hey, it could be any day now we're gonna get hit.
right.
And I wonder, was that, I mean, from what I realize now when I'm a bit older, it feels like a lot of that language was propaganda that we
Of
heard
course.
then that we hear now, right?
Of course, there was no reason to believe that there was a capability of Iran in any way striking the United States. But like, who's bombing who now? Right? Like,
Right.
they didn't bomb us. It didn't happen. So, Yeah, when you're able to like step back, the same thing has happened to me throughout my life where I look back and I'm like, wow, I like there was a whole framing that was packaged and sold to me in a way that was made me believe that we were the victims and that we were the weak ones and we were just like at constant risk of attack for like no reason. They hate us for our freedom.
Yeah.
Remember they used to say that all the time? They
Yes.
hate us for our freedoms. And it's just like, wow, these why would they do that, right? And without any sort of like more nuanced or critical analysis of geopolitical realities or how they come about.
And I think we've touched on this a bit, but how do you think that 9/11 and like the aftermath of 9/11 has really set up uh, President Trump and other presidents that preceded him and probably ones that'll come after him to essentially act this way on the world stage?
I have a new piece of legal scholarship coming out specifically on this question. And again, you know, it's a matter of hot debate and controversy. I can only speak to my view, but my view is that I very much think that the war on terror, so-called, meaning the 2 decades of national security policy that followed 9/11, I think very much paved the way for quite a bit of what Trump is doing now. And not just on a world stage, right? Like in so many different ways, laws were changed, practices were expanded. Both Congress and courts became extremely deferential to the executive branch on matters of national security. Whoever the president said is a terrorist kind of went without any evidence or any real high standard of like confirming whether someone actually engaged in any level of violence. You know, we set up this indefinite detention camp at Guantanamo that still exists. We've been running this massive drone war where outside of any areas of active war or conflict or hostilities where the United States government can just target and assassinate people because they're on a kill list that the president put together, that we're all just supposed to say like, okay, all right, we trust you. I'm sure it was fine. But now what does that look like when it's in the hands of a literal madman, right? It's like we have the boat strikes in the Caribbean where we've got drones taking out people we don't even know who they are, but we're told that they're in some way affiliated with narco terrorism, which seems to mean like being part of the drug trade, which I mean, look, terrorism is not a great term legally. There's a lot of different definitions. There's no internationally agreed upon definition, but in US domestic law, it's got a bunch of different, some of them contradictory definitions. But under just about any definition, it usually means somebody who engages in violence for a political purpose. That's not what drug cartels are. Like drug cartels engage in private gain and profiteering, right? So like it's very kind of silly to apply that label, but it has legal consequences. And because the administration has chosen to apply the war on terror framework to the war on drugs, it has like opened a new front in what's possible in the drone wars as we're seeing right in front of our faces. It also has had big consequences for immigration. And, you know, ICE agents being militarized and dispatched across the country, people being seized and detained and tortured and deported. In some instances, because the administration says they're connected to a cartel or they're, you know, part of, he calls anybody crossing the border, it's an invasion. Like he's using this war terminology and legal tools to mostly weaponize it against immigrants inside the United States, as well as getting more aggressive globally through warfare. And so what I really want people to see, I guess a couple of things. One is that we collectively, we meaning, I guess, voters and 3 branches of government in a bipartisan manner have normalized these extraordinary powers in the hands of the president going unchecked. And that if we do not course correct soon, there are still more compounding illegalities that are possible in the future. We're already seeing some of those same tools being weaponized in the direction of like protesters and dissenters and people who speak up politically and non-violently. So like more things are possible. So I want people to see that. And I really want us to recognize too that these things are all connected. Sometimes I think particularly American voters, even really active and engaged political people, miss that connection, that what they call it, things coming home to the imperial core, right? Is that if we are going to operate as a global, bloody, violent empire, that is going to come home in some way. It is going to affect our domestic policy too. These things are inextricably linked. And so we have to care about those things that we do internationally because it matters for what happens here at home.
I've seen a lot of people who are realizing they've been listed as domestic terrorists, and some of them, they're trans activists, not even like, not that any of these people should be labeled this way, not even trans people, just people activating on behalf of trans rights.
Right.
And can you tell me more about like that connection there of labeling everyone a terrorist that you don't like?
Totally. Yeah. So for now, there's not an actual legal mechanism for the administration to create like domestic terrorist designations. There is that for foreign terrorist designations that exists. But there are a bunch of laws that are possible for the executive branch and for aggressive prosecutors and immigration officials to weaponize and to turn on people and accuse them of terrorism for their activism, for their protest, for their ideology. We saw the National Security Policy Memo, NSPM 7, that the administration put out that sort of defined how they see terrorism. And it was like, people who question the government and people who, engage in, maybe a religious activity that's something that's not white Christianity, or, are activists in the space of, trans activism, as you say, or anything else. And so like, that is not actually a legal mechanism that they have at their disposal. To me, what that says is this is how they're going to utilize their police power to target people. And this is why, by the way, many, many years ago, there was some discussion about like, oh, we should have a domestic terrorism list. We could list like the Proud Boys and white nationalists and whatever. And I understand the appeal of that, but this is why it is really good that we don't have one, because you have to think about what happens when that tool is in the hands of a president like Donald Trump, who is going to use it against protesters and dissenters, right? He's not gonna list the Proud Boys. It's not gonna be the Oath Keepers. It's not gonna be the white nationalists, right? So for now, it's good that we don't have that, but we're already seeing there was, a absolutely crazy case happening right now, the Prairie Land case, where people are being prosecuted as providing material support to terrorism for being involved in like anti-ICE protests, and they're being labeled as like Antifa terror cells, which is very silly. But that kind of shows us the power that we've cultivated in the hands of the president to just sort of unilaterally decide how to label people as terrorists. And in the same way that for so long we've been saying, well, anybody who's labeled as terrorist, that's just evil and irrational and they understand nothing but force. It's a way of dehumanizing. It's a way of othering.
Right.
And it's sort of a way of signifying we're not even going to follow constitutional and human rights protections. It's something outside of that terrorism demands for us to act extrajudicially or in ways that push the bounds of the law. So I find that really scary, and I see it increasingly being utilized to suppress dissent and to target marginalized people even further. And I think that we should all be uncomfortable about that, because all of our security is linked and no one has that guarantee that it won't come for them someday.
I remember seeing actually multiple times, I think DHS on their Facebook account posting pictures of the people they arrested at protests in their names. And it's almost like they're trying to build a public list of folks, and I just think that's I don't even want to say ill-advised. They know what they're doing. They know what they're doing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. It's like, so maybe you don't have a legal mechanism to like put somebody on a particular like terrorist designation list, but you can direct negative public attention and resources their way, and you can put them in harm's way by utilizing the enormous power that you have as the federal government. It's very scary to see.
I remember seeing you speak years ago. It was pre the 2020 primary election. It was probably 2018, 2019, somewhere in there. And there was a discussion about potential nominees. And I remember you were asked who you would support. And at the time, you said,
oh, no. What did I say?
At the time, you said no one, because actually maybe you said I don't know, because
I'm sure I said no
you
one.
did
That sounds right.
you said you didn't like any of their foreign policy. And I think foreign policy is something that most Americans don't know much about. And
Yeah.
honestly, I would wager to say a lot of even our high up senators and politicians don't know a ton about either.
Totally.
And so what's one thing that you wish, or more than one thing even, that you wish most people understood about US foreign policy or power?
Yeah, it's a great question, and that's funny. I forgot I said that, but that sounds right. It's frequently hard for me to get excited about the prospect of somebody being like the next leader of the bloody empire. It's frequently really hard for me to get excited about that. Um, in terms of what I wish people knew, I think maybe I would just reiterate what I said before, which is that it is not a separate thing from our domestic policy and our domestic politics. It is completely linked. Certain powers of, I mean, it's true legally, it's true morally, it's true, just common sense wise, certain powers that the executive branch unlocks in the name of national security and foreign policy can be utilized against people at home, and it is all the time. When we're at times of war, when we're at times of conflict, those are the times when our rights and liberties are restricted at home. It's times when we become extra suspicious of outsiders and extra hostile to immigrants and foreign nationals, refugees, asylum seekers. The way that we how we interpret various domestic laws about free speech and things like that. Like, it affects us all, and again, like, all of our security is linked. And if a particular group of people are being targeted and abused in the name of any of our security, that should concern us all. So if we have candidates and we have people that are making all these promises to us at home, but they don't seem to have any care for how the United States is going to operate abroad, I find those things really hard to believe and really hard to understand. And Ta-Nehisi Coates talked about this in the last election, where there rightfully is all this talk about like saving democracy and protecting democracy. And he was talking about how, for him, if someone isn't willing to draw the line at genocide, then how are they going to draw the line at fighting for democracy? And I think that was really an astute observation, because truly, if we can't see our leaders want the United States to become less of a purveyor of violence broadly, why would we believe that that person is going to save our open society and our democratic processes here at home? They're tied, they're connected. So I think that's really what I want people to know. I want voters to know that. I want candidates to talk about that and give us a positive vision, give us a plan. How do we get out of this? How do we get out of this era of imperialism? How do we get out of this era of inflicting so much suffering in the world? What's your plan to turn that around? Because it is a part of leadership, and it's a part of power, is to be able to turn that around. And I don't get to hear it enough. And I really do think, Mark, that increasingly the public, I think especially our age group, is like hungry to hear that and actually cares to hear from candidates what their thoughts are in that arena in a way that maybe we haven't been before.
Yeah.
I don't know if you concur with that. You work in that space a lot more than I do. I don't know if you've seen that in your work.
I do agree with you. I do feel like a lot of people feel that they still need to get on board with these same types of candidates a lot of times, though.
Mhm.
They're like, well, they're the person. And I don't quite understand that mentality. The way I see it, and I've always felt this way, I believe that like we're electing targets. We are electing targets.
Yes,
We are like,
right.
and so while like I work on a lot of campaigns, especially local campaigns, and I become friends with those folks and everything, I never forget that if you represent me or if I'm
Totally.
voting for you, you are my target. Like you are, and I would rather have a target that I think is more movable than not. But
Sure.
also, like, we have to be real about like who can actually win in an election. And it's like,
Yep.
unfortunately, we're not going to see third parties winning presidential elections. And so like we
Right.
have to be smart as to who we're voting for sure. But like that quote from Ta-Nehisi Coates that you mentioned about, and sorry, I don't remember the exact quote, but about if they would do a genocide there, what do you think they're going to do to you?
Mhm.
I feel that so deeply, because I know that at the end of the day, like those are people over there. Like those are people. Those are fathers, sons, mothers, daughters. Those are people who have like whole entire lives and families, and not that any of that should matter, but like we've taken the humanity out of so much of this,
Right.
and then we've othered everything, and it's us versus them at all turns. I remember having a conversation with someone during the Ebola outbreak back in 2013, 2014, and I remember it was a friend of mine, and they said, "Hey, yeah, we shouldn't be going over there to help those people anyways. We need to worry about us here at home." And it's like, what do you mean us here at home? It's all us. This is the home, the earth. It's
Oh my
all
God.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all we got. Elizabeth, I would really appreciate you coming and joining us today and breaking down this issue. For folks listening at home, you can follow Elizabeth on Twitter at _ElizabethRB and on Blue Sky at ElizabethRB. Once again, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic chat. I hope you come back because I feel like there's a ton more things we can dive into. And I would love to hear more about your 9/11. What are you writing on 9/11 again?
Yeah, it's I've got a long legal journal article coming out about the legacy of post 9/11 national security policy and how it paved the way for Trump. So I will definitely. I've got a preview essay of it coming out shortly. That's maybe more fun to read than the long legal journal article. But I'll send them your way. Happy to talk anytime. Thank you for all the conversations you're hosting and for including me in it. I'm really happy to be here.
Of course. Yeah, thanks so much.
All right,
Take
take care.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.